BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
You're about to listen to another episode of the food programme. Episodes will be released weekly wherever you get your podcasts. But if you're in the UK, you can listen to the latest episodes a whole week earlier than anywhere else. First on BBC Sounds.
I love butter. In my fridge at the moment, I have... In fact, that's some butter just jumping out at me as I open the fridge, because I think it's fair to say that even for me, I've got slightly too much butter in there at the moment. Crammed into the door, I currently have I have 6 types of butter. Hello, my name is Felicity Cloake. I'm a food journalist and writer, and I have a confession to make. I'm a butter fanatic. There's the unsalted, bog-standard supermarket butter that I have just picked up. I've also got a couple of edible souvenirs. If I go somewhere and the butter's really good, I try and bring some back if possible. So I have the last of a huge block that I lugged back from Orkney earlier in the year. I have some Shergar Welsh butter that I really fell for. It's very salty, and I do love salt in butter. I have some Irish butter, which I think is some of the best in the world. I have some
I don't know how much butter's in your fridge right now, but I don't think this is normal.
I realised that I've got 7 types of butter because I've just spotted some whey butter, which is a byproduct of cheese making and has a very faintly sort of cheesy, slightly savoury taste. And then I've got some browned butter, which...
So when the nice people at Radio 4 rang up to ask if I fancied presenting an episode of the food programme on just one favourite ingredient, it was an easy decision. I only have eyes for butter.
And there's the crumpet done. Just going to spread some butter on it. I think that there's no point in eating a crumpet if you don't put on so much butter that it starts to come out the bottom. That's when you know that you've got enough on there. Oh, wow. That really is food of the gods. Utterly delicious, dripping with butter, just how I like it.
I believe butter has been horribly overlooked. It's often seen as just a base layer, always covered up with some fancy jam or spread. But for me, butter is the main event, a product as deserving of our attention as a fine wine or artisan cheese. So in the course of making this programme, I was delighted to meet others equally in love with a bit of butter.
I like at least half an inch thick. That's why we like it, yeah. Half toast, half butter.
I put it on everything. New potatoes are an excuse to put a great big blob of butter and some flaky sea salt on top and so on.
For me, it's probably a simple dollop on a freshly baked scone or soda bread or something.
My husband does it very thick. It literally looks like cheddar cheese is on there, like a slice of cheddar cheese.
I am with that. If you can't see the tooth marks in it, then you have not got enough butter, in my opinion.
There is a word in Danish to describe those tooth marks, tandsmør, which translates as tooth butter, and it appears more and more of us are sinking our teeth into butter. According to figures from data analysts Kantar, butter sales are up in the last year, block butter by almost 4%, while flavoured butters are up by around a whopping 40%. And this despite the fact the average price of a standard 250-gram pack has risen by more than a third in the last 5 years. So in this programme, I'll be asking, is butter back after years in the unhealthy doldrums? The second most popular butter brand in the US is Ireland's Kerrygold. It's number 1 in Germany, and they had a record year last year, shifting 12 million packs of butter and cheese a week. Sean O'Brien speaks for them and says butter has been back for a while.
2014, Time magazine put butter on the front cover with the headline, "Butter is back," and that sort of represented this kind of change in the discourse around butter, that as Time themselves put it, the war on fat was declared over. And over the past decade, I think since then, just that growing acceptance of healthy fats and butter as being a key source of that has steadily increased over that period. I think it really accelerated during the COVID pandemic years, where people were probably at home more, consuming at home, obviously, experimenting a little bit more. Home baking obviously had a big resurgence at that time. Some of those behaviours have definitely stayed. It's provided a lot of opportunity to have a little fun with consumers, certainly, and I think things like the butterboard trend a few years ago that came through TikTok.
You mentioned butter boards. What exactly is that? Is that like a cheese board but with butter?
Yeah, it's probably the best way to describe it, really, and some people will have seen it, but people would essentially cover like a cheese board in butter, but have all different types of garnishes and different things with it.
A quick glance at social media shows that the butterboard trend has garnered millions of views.
I have tried it. You know, it's definitely one that, you know, you might raise your eyebrows with when you see it alongside cheese boards, but with freshly baked bread, you can do it like a kind of a dip almost. It is super tasty.
I'm thinking about the washing up. You had to smear a bowl of butter and then you had to wash it all up.
Yeah, usually there's very little left, actually.
That is true, actually. My board would be scraped clean. What am I talking about?
We're constantly seeing these different trends pop up. Probably my favourite from recent times would be the intersection of food and fashion, which has always been, you know, this kind of unique relationship. But the butter yellow phenomenon that has kind of landed last year and worked its way into, I think I saw the Guardian recently called it the colour of summer 2025. And for me, I suppose the moment when Timothée Chalamet brought butter yellow to the red carpet was kind of that, you know, we have arrived moment. So yeah, look, it's a great opportunity to have fun with consumers who we're constantly trying to engage with and build connections with, and social media has certainly been a key part of that, I think.
Oh yeah, so recently at the Ballymaloe Festival of Food, one of the things that really, really excited people was we had a butter disco.
This is the chef, Darina Allen, who has been dubbed the Butter Queen of Ireland. She's a keen advocate of another modern butter trend, the butter disco.
Do you know what a butter disco is? So basically what it is you filled little glass jars with cream, beautiful cream, and then so a really cool DJ played really cool disco music, so you couldn't stand still, you had to, and so everybody danced and jumped around and shook their jars of cream, and in a couple of minutes you had butter. And you see, it's so exciting, because I think a lot of people know that butter comes from cream, but they have no idea how it gets from cream to butter and how easy it is. So that was like super exciting.
Darina has a dairy herd in Ireland and makes her own butter. She believes consumers are returning to it as part of the movement against ultra-processed foods.
Years and years ago, I used to do quite a lot of television, Simply Delicious and so on. Of course, I always use butter because butter is the most delicious, it's the best, it's natural, etc., etc. It never occurred to me to use anything else, but this was at a time when the whole low-fat thing was becoming the norm, and also margarine. I remember at that stage, I would always use butter and lots of cream as well, because we have such good butter in Ireland. You know, we can grow grass like nowhere else in the world. People realise that, you know, this is a pure natural product with just cream and maybe a little salt in it, instead of looking some of the spreads which have maybe 8 or 10 ingredients, and many of them you certainly wouldn't find in your own home kitchen.
Cream and a little salt. It's a winningly short list of ingredients. I'll be looking at the latest health research on butter in our diets a little later in the programme. I'll also be exploring some of butter's rich history and culture with a trip across the Irish Sea to Cork. There, I'll find out why people used to bury butter in bogs, as well as smearing it over eggs. I'll also have a go at making my own, using some vintage equipment.
Yeah, it's sort of like when you put a stick down a drain to try and work out what's stuck down there. There's definitely something solid and soft on the bottom of the churn, I think.
First, though, to England's butter heartland, the glorious West Country, with its lush green grass. Where better to talk butter than a field in Somerset, surrounded by curious cows?
I'm Jeff Bowles from Wyke Farms, Beckington, Froome, and I am a dairy farmer, producer, processor and general human being. Right, do we want to go and see a cow?
We do.
You want to jump in through fences?
These are beautiful. So we're approaching the cows now, and they're this gorgeous sort of tan colour with black faces. Is that a Jersey thing? The black faces? Very much
a Jersey thing, yeah.
They're very curious. They're coming towards us.
Yeah, Jerseys are an intelligent breed.
Yeah.
They like to know what's going on. They will all come up and say hello.
Number 67 giving you a sniff.
Yeah.
Oh, they've got very long tongues,
Oh,
don't they?
Yes, they do. It is argued that they give a similar amount of return in fat per acre than in intensive freezing.
Oh wow, they're all
here now.
They're all here,
Yeah.
surrounded by beautiful big eyelashes. Jeff, how does the flavour of the butter change according to what the cows are eating, the time of year, that kind of thing?
I don't know how it does, but it does. We had some cows get out in some turnips once, and you wouldn't ever imagine what turnip flavoured butter was like, but it definitely does come through.
Did you sell that as a special edition?
No, we didn't. It was too late, but it had already gone. But I think we do have problems with that because some chefs will like the same every day. And we've actually had customers that dropped us because it was slightly thicker one day or a slightly different tank the other day, whereas other chefs will find it as a challenge and think, well, let's just make it work. And that's one of our issues that we have, that it never is exactly the same because they never have the same food every day. But it definitely comes through as a taint. And chefs will say, oh, we had some really nice stuff last Thursday. And we're thinking, and you go back and which field was that then? We'll try and do that again Thursdays for you.
So different fields definitely have different flavours.
They do, yeah. Yeah, they do. Only slightly. Oh,
Just got knocked over by a cow.
yeah. Yeah.
Was that the cow you were just pulling the ear off, Jeff?
It was it. She had to get away.
I feel like that might have been deliberate.
Yeah.
And how did you get into the different flavoured butters?
We were asked by one of our customers to get into flavoured butters, and they wanted that all sorts of weird and wonderful combinations of ingredients were asked of us, which we can do and we have done. People tend to like a nice, wholesome, creamy butter, and that's what I think we major in.
Do you develop it if someone asked you for something? Is it you in charge of making the recipe?
Yeah, we all have a bit of a go at it, and it all gets sent out around the family. What does this taste like? Is that good or is that not good? We developed a brandy cream a while ago, and people kept bringing the samples back and saying, I'm not sure, can I have another one? And after it, all the village had a bit of a go at it, and finally we managed to find somebody that was sober enough that could give us an honest answer. And we ended up with a nice blend of brandy and cream. And
that must have been a fun development process.
That was a great fun. That was doing all that, yeah.
Better than the turnip butter.
Yeah, the turnip butter wasn't quite such a hit, no.
From out in the fields, we headed into the butter room to see where the butter making magic happens. Here they have experimented with flavoured butters like truffle or gin and blood orange for some very high-end clients.
I am Abby Hayward and I am the creamy manager.
I am Donna Williams and I'm a butter maker.
So we sell to Harrods, to Gordon Ramsay in the Harrods, and we sell to Fortnum & Mason, we sell to Selfridges.
Do you ever think when you're making the butter, do you ever imagine where it's going and whether people are going, oh, this is lovely butter, isn't it?
Yes. And every time I go to London, I go into the Harrods or the Selfridges and Fortnum & Mason, go and have a look at it on the shelf, see how it's all looking.
Do you say to them, hey, this is my butter, and Donnie, you need to go and go, I made that butter. Yeah. I'm in the butter room at Ivy House Dairy, and it's really calm. It's just this clean white space full of sort of fridges and stainless steel, but it smells really deliciously sort of milky and creamy in here. It feels like somewhere that I would quite like to work. So Donna, if you ever retire, let me know.
Will do.
There's a couple of butter churns, and actually they're much smaller than I thought they'd be. They're probably about the size of a big microwave, but obviously they're quite tall. And then there's a sort of valve on the side where the buttermilk comes out. They kind of look like something that you could have in a home kitchen if you really love butter and you wanted to make your own. So in here, the cream goes in here.
Yep.
Then what happens?
And then you put it on and then it will just keep churning and churning and churning until it's ready, and then it will go into like crumbs.
Okay.
And then it will extract the buttermilk and then it will form the butter.
And about how long does that take?
It could take anything from 10 to 15 minutes.
Is that dependent on the temperature or the time of year or?
Time of year, temperature.
So you'll know when it's ready, don't you? Because it changes, you can hear it.
Yeah, you can hear it.
You can hear that it suddenly change the sound of the churning.
Okay, as it becomes heavier and becomes more solid, you can hear it.
See it, do you want to pop it on again there? You can see it through here, and you can see it when it starts forming. So that's nearly ready now.
It's like a washing machine on spin cycle, isn't it? Way more exciting than laundry. And it's just, you can sort of see this, it's like a very, very white, thick cream, but I can also, I think, see some solid bits of butter forming there.
Yeah, this is the butter. So this is the buttermilk coming off now. So the buttermilk gets extracted as it spins. So now it's ready to drain the buttermilk.
The magic of butter making was unfolding in front of our eyes. Creamy liquid was giving way to buttery gold. But in more prosaic scientific terms, the agitation caused by the churn breaks down the protective membranes around the fat globules in the cream, allowing them to clump together to form butter solids, while the remaining liquid, the buttermilk, is drained away.
Okay, and what do you do with the buttermilk?
We then repasteurise that and sell that as well. So every single product gets used. Yeah, there's no wastage.
Wow, that buttermilk looks so delicious. It's this kind of almost...
And it's a natural buttermilk, so it's not sort of that sour buttermilk. It's just the natural product.
So you could just drink that as is if you had a mind. That would be great for baking.
A lot of people make sourdough and things like that from it.
It's also great for sort of brining chicken, and there's all sorts of stuff you can do with it.
Absolutely. The rich colour here of the butter, so it's a very yellow colour.
Yeah, and is that because of the cows are grass-fed? So yeah. And the jerseys, they make them all yellow. They give a very rich milk, I think, jerseys, yeah. It's got that look of really raw clay almost. Like you could sculpt something with that butter. Yes. You ever tempted to get a bit artistic with the butter?
Yes, I have done. I've made a clock before. Yes. It's just fun.
I love that. Donna's just now scooping all of the butter out of the churn. It's just amazing that 20 minutes ago that was cream, and now we've got this enormous hulk of butter. It's just astonishing. It's magic. Yes. So you're now patting it into a ball. Actually looks a little bit like a haggis. It's kind of like a slightly rugby ball shaped blob of butter.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got your wooden butter paddles and they're slightly ridged.
Yeah.
Is that to make it easier to grit the butter?
Yes, and to make your pattern.
Okay. So then you're just sort of rolling them down the work surface between the paddles, and then you're squashing it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really neat, really quickly.
Yeah.
You are a skilled artist. This is amazing. So there again, and it's literally, that's like 20 seconds of work.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I loved watching Donna and Abby at work in their butter room, where they might turn out 100 blocks a day. But Ivy House Farm is small in scale compared to a butter giant just down the road. Wyke Farms in Somerset turns out some 5,000 tonnes of butter every year. The manager says his butter sales have doubled over the last 2 years, and he was keen to show me around his shiny new butter dairy.
My name's Regina Sexton. I'm a family farmhouse cheese and butter maker. I'm here in Somerset.
And we're standing in this enormous room. It's like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory in here. There are stainless steel machines, pipes, labelled things like buttermilk and cream. And I can see behind Rich there's a production line with lots of little gold ingots of butter coming off it, which is quite exciting.
We've got a single churn butter maker behind you there, where we're churning the fresh cream. Essentially, it's quite a mechanised process now, but we're following the same recipe that my grandmother would have used when she was hand churning the butter herself on the farm 100 years ago. This is where we're breaking the fat globules to let the buttermilk out of the membrane, and we're trying to preserve that fat and not get any greasiness into the butter or smeariness. And you could see when we look through that window, we're breaking it beautifully. You could see those grains of buttermilk almost like snowflakes, and that's how we want to see it.
So where do you ship your butter to?
We've only just launched our butter internationally, but we're shipping to all over Europe, the US, Japan, we're offering in Australia, Africa, everywhere. We ship cheese and butter to 167 countries across the world.
Mind if we went somewhere a little bit quieter?
Yeah, that's fine.
There's a real resurgence in butter. You know, people, especially since COVID, people are home baking more. And when they're baking at home with pride, they want to be baking with the best ingredients. So they want really nice butter that's made on the farm in Somerset. But also people are treating our butters like a treat that they would have. You know, if you're going to spend quite a bit of money buying some nice bread, you want some really nice butter to go on it. And there's a lot of interest in those artisan breads. So it's only natural that they'd want a nice salted prize-winning farmhouse butter like our Ivy's butter here.
And do you think that people are increasingly seeing butter as an ingredient in its own right? You would have just had the bread and the butter. It's not like a spread. Like, you know, it used to be like a lubricant that you would just use it to basically seal your sandwich.
Call it a lubricant. No, you're absolutely right. I think it's just so nice to see people getting really excited about food that we're making here in Somerset.
Do you know how much it sells for in somewhere like Japan?
Well, I don't know there. I know in the States it's selling for about $7 a pack.
Wow.
So it's quite,
yeah.
And that's a 227 half-pound size pack.
So it's a really premium.
Yeah, so it'd be
product.
super premium farmhouse butter.
Was there a point in time when margarine seemed to be in the ascendancy that the family felt a little bit like the butter part of the business might disappear? Because people will always want cheese, but it did look in the 80s like butter had its day.
I think, it's always a worry as a farmer and someone who makes dairy products. There's vegan alternatives, or there's hydrogenated fats that can supposedly do the same job and all that sort of thing. But I think the challenge for us is to engage with new markets and find people who celebrate what we do and are prepared to pay for it. And that's why we're a very export focused business, because there are people all across the world that are prepared to pay for dairy products with provenance that are made in a traditional way. I've never been so optimistic, to be honest with you, because all around the world I can see people returning to dairy and looking for really nice dairy products that are produced in a really responsible way.
As well as butter, the West Country is of course known for its cheesemaking, and the two worlds can collide in the form of whey butter. The whey is a byproduct of cheesemaking, and cream from the whey can be used to make butter, which gives it a distinctive flavour. Jane Quicke makes it at her family farm in Devon.
When we make the cheese, we first make a junket from the milk, and then we cut the curds and then scald it by heating it up. We separate the curds and the whey, the solid part of the milk from the liquid part of the milk. We then drain off that whey and separate it. And when we're separating it, what we're doing is taking that remaining solid that's mostly made up of fat and a small amount of protein from the whey, and we're starting with that as our starting point when we then go to make butter. What that means for the person eating the butter is they're eating a product that has had all of the cultures of the cheese-making process added into it. So it's something that people are very keen on, I think, is the cultured butter that is made in France. And this is a kind of our version of a cultured butter, but made as a byproduct of the cheese-making process. To me, when I taste pure cream butters, to me it tastes less strong. So I feel like there are stronger flavours, butter flavours. It's beautiful for baking with as well. It has a very nice melting point.
You are listening to the Food Programme with me, Felicity Cloake. I am a butter superfan, and it's time to address the elephant in the buttery. Can butter ever be good for you?
I'm Sarah Berry, a Professor of Nutritional Sciences at King's College London.
In my childhood, butter was seen as really unhealthy. It was basically billed as a heart attack on toast. Whereas now I'm seeing all of these influencers online recommending a stick of butter as a snack. What's the actual truth from a nutrition point of view?
So I think the truth is quite clear from a nutrition science perspective that butter in excess is linked with unfavourable health outcomes. It increases our risk of all-cause mortality, increases our risk of some cancers, and this is mediated via different pathways. We believe from randomised controlled trials that butter can increase inflammation. We know that there's very good evidence to show that butter increases cholesterol, in particular our bad cholesterol, our LDL cholesterol. LDL stands for low density lipoprotein, and it's a particular type of cholesterol that we call our bad cholesterol.
Is butter then a less healthy choice than something like extra virgin olive oil or extra virgin coconut oil, or any of those alternatives which are also often cited as, healthy fats?
So if we compare butter to some of the very old spreads that we consumed, say 50 years ago, that contained a particular type of fat called partially hydrogenated fat that contained trans fats, then butter actually came out better in terms of health outcomes. We don't eat those partially hydrogenated fats, so we don't eat those kind of spreads that have those trans fats anymore. If you compare butter to the kind of spreads that we're eating now, or oils like extra virgin olive oil or rapeseed oil, it's very clear that these kind of seed oils or extra virgin olive oil or these spreads are favourable in comparison to butter because they lower cholesterol compared to butter. Now, it's important to also caveat this always with the fact that we need to think about the amount that we're having as well. And so whilst I think it's quite clear that butter, particularly at high intakes, isn't favourable for health, having small amounts of butter, if you enjoy it, it gives it that wonderful mouthfeel, those organoleptic properties that you just don't get from a kind of more watery-based spread. I think if you're having it in small amounts, knowing that to excess it may negatively impact health, then I think we need to balance out a little bit of the pleasure with butter versus worrying too much about its health effects.
Is there a sort of an agreed figure as to what an acceptably small amount is?
So that's a really tricky question, and I don't believe that there is an agreed figure in the literature. It depends on the rest of your diet. If the rest of your diet is reasonably healthy, I believe that having a bit of butter on your toast, so we're talking maybe 10 grams a day, isn't going to cause a major increase in risk of any chronic diseases.
Okay. Can I ask, do you eat butter yourself?
I do eat butter. I love the taste of butter. I love the creamy mouthfeel of butter. But I use it sparingly in places where I'm really going to benefit from that beautiful mouthfeel. So I spread it on my bread, for example. But in all of my cooking, I would use rapeseed oil or extra virgin olive oil in order to get the health benefits of those oils.
Is there any evidence that you're aware of that if you historically come from a dairy eating culture and sort of traditionally butter would have been your main fat, so for example if you have Irish heritage, is any better for you than someone that maybe is traditionally has a sort of olive oil based culture?
So that's interesting. I don't know of any studies that have looked at that specifically related to your heritage. What we do know is that there's huge inter-individual variability in responsiveness to saturated fat. There's some really interesting data that's come out of populations that do have a very high butter intake. So in Finland, many years ago in the 1970s, we knew that the butter intake there was incredibly high. Finland also had the highest rates of cardiovascular disease mortality. And so the government made huge efforts to try and modify people's diets with a real focus on reducing butter intake. And what this led to was an 80% reduction in cardiovascular disease mortality over a 30-year period, with butter being one of the primary dietary components that people cut down.
Okay, that's not going to be my get out of jail free card then.
There was a study that was published just a few months ago in JAMA from the Harvard group who looked in over 200,000 individuals, followed them over 30 to 50 years and looked at how their butter intake was related to their risk of all-cause mortality and other diseases. And what they found was that for every 5 gram increase in butter intake, there was a 4% increase in total mortality. And what they also found is that if you replace 10 grams of butter with an equivalent amount of a plant-based oil, so canola oil, sunflower seed oil, for example, that resulted in a predicted 17% reduction in total mortality.
Okay, so basically save the butter for the bread and elsewhere maybe use an olive oil or a rapeseed oil or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, we need to enjoy our food. Food is there to bring us pleasure. It's there to taste great. And so what I would say is that if you do like a bit of butter, have it, but have it in moderation.
I will be weighing out my butter now. Until when I see what 10 grams is, I'm going to be gutted. I just need to see what 10 grams look like so I can sort of fix it in my head as a target.
The packets that you get in restaurants, the kind of pre-sealed little packets that you get of butter, they're normally about 6 grams.
Okay, all right. That's a good visualisation, thank you. Sobering visualisation.
For someone with no fewer than 7 butters at home in the fridge, the idea of limiting myself to a mere 10 grams of the golden stuff a day was hard to swallow. I needed to get away to clear my head.
Everybody pinches my butter. They won't leave my butter alone.
I flew to Ireland, to a sanctuary for butter fans. At the Butter Museum in Cork, they have butter-themed songs playing on repeat. This is a saucy number by Elsie Carlyle from the early days of the Second World War. But the big draw in this museum hails from much further back and demonstrates the rich history of butter. My guide was museum director Danielle O'Donovan.
Danielle, I remember from my previous visit here that the chief attraction is your bog butter. Can you tell us what is bog butter?
Ireland, and to a lesser extent Scotland, has a tradition of people burying butter in bogs. And it's a long tradition. So people have been doing this, I think, for about 4,500 years. So the earliest samples date from maybe the early Bronze Age, and then the latest to after, like the post-medieval, the early modern period. So it's a very long tradition. And peat bogs are amazing. They have these amazing preservative qualities, and we've got a lot of butter, maybe up to 500 samples of bog butter.
Fascinating. So it's sort of it's like a small beer keg, and it is full. It's sort of open at the top, which I imagine wouldn't have been buried open, but at some point the lid has disappeared. And it actually looks like barbecue coals that have been left out in the rain. It doesn't look like butter at all. It's slightly unpromising looking, but it's also split open so you can see through the side that it is absolutely full of this sort of strange calcified substance. That would be quite a large amount of butter in there. That would be a community or a family's wealth.
This is the really interesting thing, isn't it? I mean, the effort to carve something like that is huge. You're hollowing out a whole tree trunk, and then you're creating this butter. The whole community is coming together to farm the landscape to make this butter, and then it goes into the bog. So some people have said it cannot just be preservation and safety.
And why do we think that they buried their butter?
There are mixed theories. It could be to preserve it because it's a summer food that you wanted to eat in the winter, and the bog had a great preservative properties and it was cooler. But it could be much more complicated.
So the bog could be acting as a fridge, or it could be acting as a sort of safe or even a shrine.
Possibly all of those things at once. And I guess that's the really fascinating thing about bog butter. We just don't understand people's motivations for burying it.
And that's interesting because it really speaks to how important butter has been historically to the Irish, the wealth of the country.
And back then it was a real luxury foodstuff. Wealthy people managed to eat butter. And the poorer people probably would not. Cattle were the measure of wealth. In fact, somebody said they were the measure of everything.
And has that been analysed? So can you tell what the chemical constituents of the butter now are as opposed to modern day butter?
It's actually really fascinating work. So with the kind of advent of modern science, we used to be able to dendrochronology date the wood, but now we can radiocarbon date the butter. So the oldest sample is pushing towards 2400 BCE, so early Bronze Age. So we've been burying butter in bogs for a long time because it goes right to the post-medieval era.
The Butter Museum is housed in part of a building which used to be the world's biggest butter market. The imposing architecture is a grand reminder of a golden age of butter.
I am standing outside the Cork Butter Exchange with Regina Sexton from University College Cork, who is a food and culinary historian. Can you tell us what we're looking at? Because it's a really impressive building. It looks like a huge bank or almost a government building.
It is impressive because you can see there is just this spectacular carving of a cow's head just over the entrance point. And this was the butter market where the butter was brought from the hinterlands around Munster, particularly the Cork farming lands, Kerry, into Limerick in particular. So the butter would have been brought here and it would have been inspected and it would have been graded, and from there it would have been moved from the city down to the port of Cork at Cove for exportation around the world, making this butter market the largest butter market in the world in the 19th century, even though the building or the butter market itself and the butter exchange has been on the go since 1770. And what I like about it is that in terms of its location, it's facing down to the river, one of the channels of the River Lee, and ultimately it's looking outwards. So it's not an insular gaze, it's looking outwards because that's where the money was. And that's where the trade was with Britain, with the European mainland, and more importantly, connecting to the transatlantic trade across to the Americas.
Regina then took me to another historic market in the city centre for more buttery tales, the historic English market.
So Moynihan's poultry here was one of the last sellers of buttered eggs, which has just stopped.
Last time I was here, there was a big old display of buttered eggs, but they've gone.
They have.
Because there was a lack of demand?
I would imagine so.
Explain why historically people rub their eggs with butter for sale.
So what you're doing is you're trying to preserve eggs to extend their life, extend their shelf life effectively. So what happens, and you'll find this in lots of different cultures, is when the hen lays an egg, the egg is hot, it's warm, and the shell is porous. So if you rub the warm egg in your hands, the palm of your hands, and you have some fat in your hands, it can be any type of fat. In Ireland, the fat is butter, and once the egg cools, the porous shell will seal, and that fat layer will lock in a certain degree of freshness. So then you get buttered eggs. But I have heard people tell me that those buttered eggs would last for up to a year. I grew up with buttered eggs. I looked at them every time I walked through the market, and unfortunately now they're not on sale anymore because I presume just changing tastes, they're gone. You never know, it might revive again.
So now that we've been around the market, we've seen actually a few different types of butter here. What is the Irish relationship in butter? Why is it so important here?
Irish people love butter. They just love it, and they love salty butter, which is part of the Irish palate, you know, fat and salt. It makes these very flirtatious, successful relationships with other stalwarts of an Irish food culture, potatoes for instance, and you put salted summer butter on a new Irish potato with its tissue-thin skin. You have the taste of summer there. That embodies a very gnarled, complex story of food in Ireland. So I think we love it, but we mightn't talk an awful lot about it, but the relationship is strong, the relationship is there. And despite the fear around butter being a fat, it did do a wobble, but it didn't break that tradition.
Have you seen a resurgence of interest in butter locally? Are we perhaps living in a second golden age of Irish butter?
I think so, and in that regard, I suppose Ireland is falling into sort of international patterns in thinking about what's a good fat and what's a bad fat. And of course, this is the Irish fat. You know, I would say almost we're, in an evolutionary sense, we're acclimatised to eating that type of fat. It's the Irish olive oil. You know, it really is. And I think people are beginning to question the discourses around what fat is and what fat means for health. And in that context, I think the simplicity of the fat and the production of butter, the simplicity around the processing, people are beginning to realise that this is not the bad fat that we were led to believe it was.
Back at the Butter Museum, Danielle had made me an offer I couldn't refuse, a chance to churn my own butter. But we wouldn't be using a fancy modern machine. Instead, a historic dash churn, which looked a bit like a barrel with a mop handle sticking out the top.
We are going to put about 30 litres of cream maybe into the bottom of this bucket. It's like a wooden bucket with a wonderful waist, which is designed to stop splashing. And, you know, it looks quite antique, doesn't it, and antiquated, but people were making butter and dash churns in Ireland right to the end of the 19th century.
And how long do you think it's going to take us to turn cream into butter in this vast mop bucket?
That is a very good question. We make butter here in a glass tabletop churn for demonstrations, and usually it can take a good, 10-15 minutes to get the butter to come. That's what it's called, or break. But because it's been warm weather, that's been happening quite quickly. So I'm hoping 15 minutes tops, but it's going to be a workout.
And so the temperature really affects the speed at which the process happens?
Yes, it does. That the cream has to be between 10 and 15 degrees. And I suppose that's why there's so much superstition, in Ireland about butter not coming and then blaming other supernatural forces. It's actually quite specific.
OK, but we are now in summer, so this is a perfect time to be making butter. Let's go for it. I was going to see two huge, worryingly huge-looking tubs of cream in front of us. It's a gorgeous yellow colour.
So grass-fed cows have this beautiful beta-carotene, and that's what gives the cream the golden colour and the butter the really beautiful yellow colour that you get.
Yeah, I think I'm right in saying that Irish grass has the highest beta-carotene levels, some of the highest in the world, which is why your butter is so beautifully yellow. Okay, so it's about just under half full, I would say, the bucket.
This is the dasher, and we just have to start
And can I ask the dasher, what is at the end of it? Because all I can see is what looks like a broomstick, but what's the actual implement at the end?
So it's essentially like a wooden cross,
okay,
with holes drilled into the wood to allow the cream to pass through, so we're getting the maximum work out. Because when you make butter, it's not chemistry, it's physics. We're just whacking this cream around to get the butter particles, the butterfat particles, to come together. That's what we want to happen. This is already hard. Am I already turning quite red?
You're looking very elegant while you're doing that, I have to say. Yeah, it's definitely better than the gym, because you can eat butter at the end of it, hopefully. Sort of like when you put a stick down the drain to try and work out what's stuck down there. There's definitely something solid and soft on the bottom of the churn, I think.
Yeah. There's resistance there, isn't it, when you're pulling it up and down, and the cream is getting thicker and thicker, and I think that's what you're feeling.
Yeah.
A good 15 long minutes of squelchy churning elapsed before finally...
Now we have a churn which looks like it's sort of full of actually really creamy scrambled eggs. It looks delicious. Again, it's like walking through a bog in Wellingtons.
I think we have butter, Felicity.
Woo!
Well done. That was seriously hard work. I think you've made some pretty good looking butter. I think the next job is to try it.
Okay, I'm certainly here for that.
So now we have beautiful Irish soda bread that's just come to the table, and that's spreading very well, actually.
This is my dream. There's an enormous bowl of yellow butter and then just lots and lots of delicious bread sitting there waiting to be anointed with with generous amounts of the butter. This isn't just a scraping, this is...
Oh no, it's very important, Felicity, when you eat butter. You should be able to see your teeth marks in it, or what's the point?
Exactly. Well, now that we know how much work goes into the butter, I feel like we've earned it. Oh, sorry. That is delicious. You can taste the cream. It's got that gorgeous sort of thick, almost like top of the cream, almost clotted cream flavour. It is incredible. I think that might be the best butter I've ever tasted. Maybe that's just because I helped make it.
That is an amazing claim to fame. I think also you get the complexity of flavour. Again, the relationship with the kind of slightly salty sweet bread. It's so good.
Oh, it's delicious. It really is. This is the breakfast of champions.